Princess Nera walked slowly through the royal menagerie, her four-fingered hand brushing against the glass walls that held creatures from 100 different worlds. The soft blue light of her homeworld's twin moons filtered through the crystal ceiling, casting long shadows across the polished floor. As the only daughter of Emperor June, ruler of the mighty Viscai Empire, Nera had everything she could ever want. The Viscai controlled thousands of star systems. Their ships could cross galaxies. Their weapons could destroy planets. And Nera would one day control it all. But today, she was bored. "Princess, your father requests your presence in the new exhibition wing," said Mino, her personal guard. His scaled skin shimmered in the moonlight as he bowed deeply. Nera sighed. Another gift. What strange beast has he captured now? She followed Mino through the twisting corridors of the menagerie. The walls were lined with habitats containing the rarest and most exotic life forms in the known universe. Some creatures glowed with inner light. Others changed shape as she passed. A few pressed against their enclosures, eyes following her movement. The new wing was larger than the others, with higher ceilings and stronger barriers. Emperor June stood tall in his ceremonial armor, his crest fully extended in pride. "My daughter," he said, his voice booming in the large space. "Today marks your 200th cycle. I have brought you something special." He gestured to a circular enclosure in the center of the room. Unlike the other habitats that tried to mimic natural environments, this one was bare. It contained only a simple sleeping platform, a water dispenser, and a single occupant. A human. Nera had heard of humans before. The small blue planet called Earth had resisted Viscai conquest for nearly 30 cycles, longer than any other world in recent memory. The Viscai military had expected an easy victory, as they had achieved countless times before. Instead, they found themselves in a grinding war against a species that refused to surrender. "We captured this specimen during our last scouting mission," Emperor June explained. "They call themselves humans. Fascinating creatures, not very advanced technologically, but surprisingly resilient." Nera approached the enclosure. The human was male, with short black hair and skin the color of pale sand. He wore the simple gray garment given to all specimens in the menagerie. Unlike the other creatures who cowered or performed tricks for treats, this human stood straight, his eyes fixed directly on hers. "Does it have a name?" Nera asked. "They call him Taiho," her father replied. "Our scientists say he was some kind of military strategist on their world." Nera circled the enclosure, studying the human from all angles. He turned with her, never breaking eye contact. There was something in those eyes, not fear, not anger, but something else, something calculating. "Can it speak?" she asked. "Their language is primitive, but our translators are working on it," the emperor said. "The scientists believe they are moderately intelligent, perhaps even capable of basic problem solving." Tahoe's mouth twitched slightly at this comment, almost like a suppressed smile. "I'll leave you to examine your gift," Emperor June said. "Remember, daughter, one day all these beings will be yours to command. It is important you understand even the lesser species in our realm." With that, he swept from the room, his guards following behind. Alone with the human, Nera tapped a control panel, activating the one-way sound barrier. Now she could hear inside the enclosure, but the human could not hear her. Tahoe sat down on his platform, picked up a small stone, and began scratching something on the floor. Curious, Nera moved closer. He was drawing a map of the menagerie, perfectly from memory after just one walk through its corridors. When he finished, he looked up directly at where Nera stood, though the glass should have appeared as a mirror from his side. He smiled, and to her shock, spoke a perfect sentence in her language. "The walls have ears, princess," he said softly. "But perhaps not all cages are built to hold what they catch." Nera's heart jumped in her chest. This was no ordinary specimen. This human knew exactly where he was, and from the look in his eyes, exactly what he was doing there. For 3 nights, Princess Nera could not sleep. The human's words kept repeating in her mind. How did he learn her language so quickly? Why did he pretend not to understand? What did he mean about cages? On the fourth night, she returned to the menagerie alone. The guards bowed as she passed, but none followed. As the emperor's daughter, her wishes were never questioned. The menagerie was different at night. Most creatures slept in their habitats, while others glowed softly in the darkness. Nera walked quietly to the human's enclosure, expecting to find him asleep. Instead, Tahoe sat cross-legged on the floor. His eyes were closed, but he opened them the moment she entered. "I knew you would come back," he said in perfect Viscai, not broken or accented, but as clear as any native speaker. Nera stood frozen, then quickly checked to make sure no one else was nearby. She pressed her hand to the control panel, activating the sound barrier so they could speak privately. "How do you know our language?" she demanded. Tahoe smiled. "Your scientists tested me for weeks before bringing me here. They spoke freely, thinking I couldn't understand. I'm a quick learner." "That's impossible," Nera said. "No species has ever mastered Viscai so quickly." "Perhaps your empire underestimates humans," Tahoe replied. He stood up and walked to the glass, standing directly across from her. "We adapt. It's what we do best." Despite herself, Nera was curious. "Our reports say your planet is primitive. You haven't even achieved proper space travel." Tahoe laughed softly. "By your standards, perhaps, but we've survived on a world that tries to kill us every day. Storms, earthquakes, predators, disease. Earth is not gentle. It made us strong." Nera had never heard anyone speak this way. In the Viscai Empire, all other species were considered lesser beings. That was the natural order of things. Yet this human spoke as if they were equals. "Why are you here?" she asked. "You're a military strategist. Did they capture you in battle?" Tahoe's eyes seemed to look through her. "No one captures me unless I allow it." A chill ran down Nera's spine. "You wanted to be caught." "Let's just say I was curious about the empire that thinks it can conquer Earth." For the next hour, they talked. Tahoe told her about human cultures, their art, music, and history. He described Earth's oceans and mountains, its cities and forests. He spoke of human philosophy and science in ways that made Nera realize how little she truly knew about this species. "Tomorrow," he said as their time grew short, "bring me something to read. Your history, perhaps. I want to understand the Viscai better." Nera hesitated. Sharing imperial knowledge with a specimen was forbidden. Yet she found herself nodding. "Why should I trust you?" she asked. "You shouldn't," Tahoe replied honestly, "just as I shouldn't trust you. But sometimes, Princess, trust is less important than curiosity." The next night, Nera returned with a data tablet containing basic Viscai history texts. She slipped it through the small transfer compartment used for feeding. "This could get me in trouble," she said. Tahoe took the tablet carefully. "Your secret is safe with me." Then he added, "Did you know that on Earth, some of our most important friendships began with small acts of rebellion?" "This isn't friendship," Nera said quickly. "This is research." "Of course," Tahoe replied with a knowing smile. Over the next several nights, their meetings continued. Nara brought more information about her world, and Tahoe shared stories of Earth. She began to see that humans were not the simple creatures Viscai science had labeled them. They were complex, creative, and surprisingly similar to her own people in ways that mattered. One night, as their conversation ended, Tahoe suddenly became serious. "Princess, there's something you should know," he said, his voice low. "Your cousin, Prince Doran, has been visiting the military research wing. He asks many questions about Earth's defenses." Nera felt her blood go cold. "How do you know this?" "The guards talk when they think no one understands," Tahoe said. "And I believe he's planning something that will put you in danger." For the first time, Nera realized that her strange connection with this caged human might be more important than she ever imagined. Princess Nera walked quickly through the grand corridors of the imperial palace. Guards stood at attention as she passed, but she barely noticed them. Her mind was filled with worry. 2 days had passed since Tahoe's warning about Prince Doran. In that time, Nera had watched her cousin carefully. He smiled at her during meals. He spoke kindly to her father. But now she saw what she had missed before. His eyes were cold. His smile never reached them. Today, she was headed to the throne room. Her father had called an emergency meeting of the Royal Council. This was unusual. Emperor Jun only called such meetings in times of crisis. When Nara entered the massive throne room, she immediately sensed something was wrong. Her father sat on his throne, but he looked pale. His imperial crest, usually standing tall and proud, hung limply to one side. "Father," she said, rushing to his side. "Are you well?" Emperor Jun looked at her with glassy eyes. "Nara," he said, his voice weak. "I feel strange. The medical team says it might be the shifting sickness." Nara felt fear grip her heart. The shifting sickness was rare but deadly to Viscai. It attacked their central nervous system, causing weakness that slowly spread throughout the body. "Who has examined you?" she asked. "Dr. Garrow," her father replied. "Doran's personal physician." Nara's suspicion grew. Tahoe's warning echoed in her mind. The throne room doors opened, and Prince Doran entered with 4 royal guards. He looked concerned, but Nara now noticed the slight upturn of his mouth, almost a smirk. "Uncle," Doran said, bowing deeply. "How terrible you are unwell." He turned to the gathered council members. "As the Emperor's nephew and second in line, I will temporarily take on royal duties until he recovers." Several council members nodded in agreement. Nara noticed they were all Doran's friends or allies. "I am first in line," Nara said firmly. "I will handle my father's duties." Doran smiled smoothly. "Cousin, you are young and untested. The Empire needs experienced leadership in this difficult time." "The law is clear," Nara replied. "As heir, The law also states," Doran interrupted, "that if the heir is suspected of wrongdoing, emergency powers go to the next in line." The room went silent. "What wrongdoing?" Nara demanded. Doran signaled, and one of his guards stepped forward with a small vial. "This was found in your chambers, Princess. Our tests show it contains traces of the same toxin now affecting the Emperor." Nara felt the blood drain from her face. "That's a lie. I would never harm my father." "Take her to her quarters," Doran ordered the guards. "For her own protection, of course, and for the safety of the Emperor, she is not to leave until this matter is resolved." 2 guards moved toward Nara. She looked to her father for help, but Emperor Jun seemed confused, his eyes unfocused. "This is treason," Nara said, but allowed herself to be escorted out. Fighting would only make things worse. Back in her chambers, with guards posted outside, Nara paced the floor. Doran had planned this well. The vial was planted. The witnesses were his. Even her father's illness was too convenient. As night fell, Nara made a decision. She needed help, and there was only one person she trusted now. Using her royal access codes, she connected to the menagerie's security system from her personal tablet. Most of the cameras showed sleeping creatures. In Tahoe's enclosure, the human sat perfectly still, as if waiting. Nara typed a message that would appear on the small screen in his habitat. "I need your help. My father is sick. Doran has taken control. I am trapped." Seconds passed. Then Tahoe looked directly at the camera and nodded. He typed back, "They underestimate humans. They will also underestimate what a human will do for someone he respects." He stood and walked to the glass wall of his enclosure. With precise movements, he began tapping a pattern on the surface. To anyone watching, it would look like nervous behavior from a captured specimen. But Nara recognized it immediately. It was a military code she had shown him from Viscai history texts. He was spelling out a message. Be ready. Tonight, this human fights for you. The night grew darker as Nera waited in her chambers. She had disabled the room's security cameras using tricks she had learned from royal security training. The guards outside would think she was sleeping. Meanwhile, in the menagerie, Taiho sat motionless in his enclosure. The night guard, bored with watching sleeping creatures, paid little attention to the human. This was a mistake. What the Viscae never understood about humans was their physical capabilities. The Viscae evolved on a low-gravity world. Their bones were lighter, their muscles less dense. Humans, from Earth's stronger gravity, were built differently. When the guard turned away, Taiho moved. In the days since his capture, he had carefully studied the enclosure's lock system. Now, using a small piece of metal he had worked loose from his sleeping platform, he triggered the emergency release mechanism. The glass door slid open without an alarm. Taiho stepped out silently. The guard turned too late. Before he could shout, Taiho struck a precise blow to the side of his neck, a weak point in Viscae anatomy that Taiho had observed during his captivity. The guard collapsed without a sound. Taiho quickly dressed in the guard's uniform. It was too big, the arms too long, but it would help him move through the palace. He accessed the guard's computer panel and found a map of the palace. Princess Nera's chambers were in the east wing. On his way, Taiho passed several other guards. He kept his head down, his movements confident. The Viscae never expected a lesser species to walk freely among them. Their arrogance was their weakness. In another part of the palace, Prince Doran sat with his closest advisors. He raised a glass of blue liquid in a toast. "Tomorrow, we announce that the princess has confessed to poisoning her father," he said. "By next week, she will be exiled, and I will take the throne." "What if the emperor recovers?" asked one advisor. Doran smiled coldly. The dose was carefully measured. "He will weaken day by day, until the end comes naturally. No one will suspect." Outside Nera's chambers, two guards stood at attention. They straightened when they saw what appeared to be another guard approaching. "Prince Doran sent me to check on the princess," Taiho said in perfect Viscae. The guards looked confused. One stepped forward. "You're not." He never finished his sentence. Taiho moved with a speed that shocked both guards. On Earth, this fighting style was called taekwondo. To the Viscae, it seemed impossible. In seconds, both guards were unconscious. Taiho used their access card to open Nera's door. The princess backed away at first, then recognized him despite the ill-fitting uniform. "Taiho, how did you?" "No time," he said. "Your cousin has guards everywhere. We need to move now." Nera grabbed a small bag she had prepared. "We need to get to my father. He needs real medical help, not Doran's doctor." "First, we need weapons," Taiho said. Nera looked uncertain. "I'm not a fighter." "On Earth, we have a saying," Taiho replied. "Sometimes the best fighter is the one who knows what to fight for." They moved silently through the palace corridors. Nara led them to a service lift that took them to the lower levels where security was lighter. "The Royal Medical Wing is 3 levels up from here," she whispered, "but it will be heavily guarded." Taiho nodded. "Is there another way? A service entrance, maybe?" Nera thought for a moment. "The air purification system. All rooms have access points for maintenance, even the medical chambers." As they made their way to the maintenance tunnels, Nera looked at Taiho curiously. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "I kept you in a cage." Taiho's expression was unreadable. "You treated me with respect when others saw only a specimen. You listened when others assumed I had nothing worth saying." He paused. "On Earth, we value freedom, but we also value loyalty to those who earn it." They reached the maintenance entrance. As Nera entered the code to open it, Taiho added something that made her pause. "Besides," he said with a small smile, "humans have a thing for challenging the odds. And right now, Princess, the odds are against us both." The door slid open, revealing a narrow tunnel that would take them to the Emperor. Somewhere above, Prince Doran was preparing for his final victory, unaware that a caged human was about to change everything. The maintenance tunnels were narrow and dimly lit. Dust floated in the air, tickling Nera's nose. The Viscai princess crawled behind Tahoe, following his steady movements. These tunnels carried clean air throughout the palace, but few ever used them except for repair workers. "How much farther?" Tahoe whispered. "2 more junctions," Nera replied. "Then we'll be above my father's medical chamber." They moved in silence, listening for any sounds that might mean danger. The tunnels amplified even the smallest noises. Their breathing seemed loud in the enclosed space. At the second junction, Nera pointed to a grate in the floor. Through it, they could see the Emperor's medical room. Emperor Jun lay on a bed surrounded by machines. A single guard stood by the door. Dr. Garrow, Doran's personal physician, checked readings on a monitor. "That's not the regular Imperial doctor," Nara whispered. "And where are the medical droids? Father should have at least 3 attending him." Tahoe's eyes narrowed as he studied the scene below. "Your cousin is keeping real help away. Look at the doctor's hands." Dr. Garrow was injecting something into the Emperor's IV line. His movements were furtive, quick. "He's poisoning him more," Nara gasped. Before Tahoe could stop her, Nera pushed open the grate and dropped into the room. Her royal training included some basic fighting moves. She landed on her feet and lunged at the doctor, knocking the syringe from his hand. "Get away from my father," she shouted. The guard turned, weapon raised. But Tahoe was already dropping through the opening. He landed directly on the guard, using his weight and Earth's fighting techniques to bring the larger Viscai down hard. Dr. Garrow backed away, his hands raised. "Princess, this is a misunderstanding. I was giving medicine to help your father." Nera picked up the fallen syringe. "Then you won't mind if we test this." The doctor's expression changed from fear to anger. "You fool. Prince Doran is the future of the Viscai Empire. Your father is weak. You are weaker, befriending a human pet." "How did you know about that?" Nara asked, suddenly realizing the trap. The door slid open. Prince Doran entered with 6 armed guards. He smiled coldly at Nera. "Cousin, did you think your little visits to the menagerie went unnoticed? We've been watching you for weeks." He looked at Tahoe with disgust. "And you, human, you're more trouble than you're worth." "The council will hear about this," Nera said. "You've been poisoning my father." Doran laughed. "The council does what I tell them now. Besides, who will believe you? The jealous princess, conspiring with a primitive alien to overthrow her father's rightful successor." He turned to his guards. "Take them both. The princess to the high-security cells. The human." He paused, smiling cruelly. "Take him to the dissection lab. Our scientists have been eager to study human biology more thoroughly." 2 guards grabbed Nera. She fought, but their strength was greater. Tahoe moved to help her, but 3 guards surrounded him, weapons pointed at his chest. "Don't fight," Nara called to him. "They'll kill you." Tahoe stood still, but his eyes never left Doran's face. The look in them made even the confident prince step back slightly. As they were led from the room, Doran called after them. "Tonight, Nara, your father will slip away peacefully. Tomorrow, the Empire mourns. The day after, I take the throne." He smiled. "And your human friend will be nothing but research notes in our military database." The guards separated them in the corridor. Nara was pushed toward the prison level. Tahoe was dragged in the opposite direction, toward the labs. "Remember what humans fight for, princess," Tahoe called out in her language. Their eyes met one last time before they were pulled around different corners. In that brief moment, Nera saw something in the human's gaze that gave her hope, not defeat, but determination. As the guards marched her down to the cells, Nera realized something important. Doran had made a critical mistake. He thought capturing the human was the end of his problem. He didn't understand that for humans like Tahoe, capture was just the beginning of the fight. The dissection lab was cold and sterile. White lights buzzed overhead. Metal tables gleamed with sharp tools. Two scientists waited as the guards brought Tahoe in. "Secure the specimen," ordered the lead scientist, a tall Viscai with pale green scales. "Prince Doran wants the dissection recorded for military research." The guards pushed Tahoe toward a metal table with restraints. They thought the human had given up. They were wrong. Humans had something the Viscai could not understand. On Earth, it was called adrenaline, a chemical that flooded the body in times of danger, making humans faster and stronger. As the guards reached to strap him down, Tahoe's body surged with it. In one explosive movement, Tahoe twisted away from the guards. His elbow struck the first guard's throat. His foot swept the second guard's legs from under him. Before the scientists could react, Tahoe had grabbed a surgical tool from the table, a long, sharp probe that now became a weapon. "Stay back," he warned in Viscai. The stunned scientists raised their hands. One reached slowly for an alarm button. "Don't," Tahoe said. His voice was calm, but his eyes promised action if they moved. Tahoe quickly tied up the guards and scientists with medical restraints. He took a guard's weapon, a stun rod that could disable a Viscai with one touch. "Where are the high-security cells?" he demanded. "Level B3, one scientist answered, too afraid to lie. "But you'll never reach it. The palace is full of guards." Tahoe smiled grimly. "You still don't understand humans, do you?" He left the lab, wearing a guard's uniform again. The halls were busier now as news of Nera's capture spread through the palace. Tahoe moved confidently, keeping his head down. The Viscai saw what they expected to see, just another guard going about his duties. Meanwhile, in a cold cell on level B3, Princess Nera sat alone. The cell was small, with just a bench and a force field door that glowed blue. Through it, she could see two guards standing watch. Suddenly, alarms began to sound throughout the palace. The guards looked up, alert. "What is it?" one asked into his communicator. The answer made both guards stiffen. "The human has escaped. All guards on alert." Nera felt a small spark of hope. Tahoe was free. But what could one human do against an entire palace of armed Viscai? She soon got her answer. The lights in the corridor flickered, then went out. The emergency lights came on, bathing everything in red. The force field on Nera's cell weakened, but didn't fail. The guards raised their weapons, peering into the dim corridor. A small object rolled toward them. "What is?" one guard began. The object exploded in a flash of blinding light. It was a medical scanner Tahoe had modified into a flash grenade. The guards covered their eyes, temporarily blinded. A shadow moved in the red light. There was a sound of quick strikes, then bodies falling. When Nera could see again, Tahoe stood before her cell, the guards unconscious at his feet. He held a control pad taken from one of them. "I told you humans are adaptable," he said, typing a code into the pad. The force field flickered and died. Nera rushed out. "How did you escape? How did you find me?" "I'll explain later," Tahoe said. "Right now, we need to get to your father and stop Doran." They moved quickly through the emergency-lit corridors. Most guards had been called to search other areas where Tahoe had set off distractions. "Doran will have guards around my father," Nera warned. Tahoe handed her the stun rod. "Can you use this?" Nera nodded. "Basic royal defense training." "Good," Tahoe said, "because where we're going, we'll need to fight." They reached the main medical level. As expected, 4 guards stood outside the Emperor's chamber. Inside, they could see Prince Doran and Dr. Garrow standing over the Emperor's bed. "We're too late," Nera whispered. "They're finishing what they started." Tahoe looked at the desperate princess, then at the guards blocking their way. "Princess," he said quietly, "on Earth, we have a saying. It's never too late while you're still breathing. He gripped the weapon he had taken. Stay behind me. When I move, follow close. What happened next would be told in HFY Stories for generations. A single human, moving with impossible speed and strength, charged 4 armed guards. The guards were trained warriors of the Empire's elite forces, but they had never faced anything like a human fighting to protect someone they cared about. Tahoe moved like water, flowing around energy blasts, using the guard's size and weight against them. One by one, they fell. When the last guard dropped, Tahoe turned to Nera, breathing hard. Now, he said, let's save your father. The door to Emperor Jun's medical chamber slid open. Prince Doran and Dr. Guro turned in surprise. Doran's hand moved to his weapon, but froze when he saw who stood in the doorway. This is impossible, he hissed. Tahoe stood with Princess Nera behind him. The human's stolen uniform was torn from fighting. Blood, both his and HFY, stained his clothes. His eyes were locked on Doran. Step away from the Emperor, Tahoe said calmly. Doran laughed, though fear edged his voice. You think you've won. Guards, he shouted. Guards. They can't hear you, Nera said, stepping forward. The emergency systems have sealed this section. This was a lie, but Doran didn't know that. Tahoe had simply taken out the guards outside. More would come soon. Dr. Guro backed away from the Emperor's bed. Prince Doran, I was just following orders. Silence. Doran snapped. He drew his weapon, a pulse gun that could kill instantly. One more step, and the Emperor dies right now. Everyone froze. The prince's hand was steady, the weapon pointed at the sleeping Emperor's head. What do you want? Nera asked. Safe passage out of the palace, Doran said. A ship. And you two as hostages. No, said a weak voice. All eyes turned to the Emperor. Emperor Jun's eyes were open. He looked pale and sick, but aware. Father. Nera moved toward him, but stopped when Doran raised his weapon. How are you awake? Doran demanded. The drugs should have kept you unconscious for days. The Emperor's eyes moved to Tahoe. The human. I heard his voice. It pulled me back. He turned to his nephew. Doran, what have you done? Before Doran could answer, the chamber doors slid open again. 6 royal guards rushed in, weapons raised. Arrest them, Doran shouted, pointing at Nera and Tahoe. They tried to kill the Emperor. The guards hesitated, looking between Doran and their Emperor. Wait, Emperor Jun said, his voice stronger now. Listen to me. I am still your Emperor. The guards lowered their weapons slightly. My nephew has poisoned me, Jun continued. Dr. Guro has been giving me drugs to keep me weak. Dr. Guro fell to his knees. Mercy, Emperor. Prince Doran forced me. Doran's face twisted with rage. Lies. The human has confused you, Uncle. They're trying to take the throne. The room balanced on a knife's edge. The guards looked uncertain, weapons still ready. At that moment, Tahoe did something unexpected. He knelt before the Emperor's bed. Emperor Jun, he said clearly, I am Tahoe of Earth. I was brought to your world as a captive, a specimen in your menagerie. I could hate your people for this. Instead, I fought for your daughter because she showed me respect when others did not. The Emperor looked at the kneeling human with wonder. My world is far away, Tahoe continued. My people are different from yours, but some things are the same across the stars. Honor, truth, loyalty. These things I offer to you and your daughter now. The room was silent. The guards looked at each other, then at their Emperor. Slowly, Emperor Jun raised his hand and pointed at Doran. Arrest my nephew. The guards moved without hesitation. Doran fired his weapon wildly, but missed. In seconds, the guards had him pinned and disarmed. You can't do this, Doran shouted as they dragged him away. A human. You trust a human over your own blood. The Emperor turned to Tahoe, who still knelt. Rise, Tahoe of Earth. Tahoe stood. Nara moved to her father's side, checking the monitors. We need to flush the poison from your system, she said. First, Emperor June said, I must do something important. He looked at Tahoe. You fought for my daughter when my own blood betrayed her. The Viscai Empire has treated humans as lesser beings. Today proves we were wrong. He raised his hand weakly. Tahoe of Earth, I recognize you as a sentient being with full rights in the Viscai Empire. The first human to be so recognized. Nara gasped. This was unprecedented. No alien species had ever been given such status. Father, are you sure? She asked. The Emperor nodded. The human fought for you when he had every reason to hate us. That kind of loyalty deserves respect. He looked at Tahoe again. Will you help us make things right between our worlds? Tahoe looked at Nara, then back to the Emperor. I will try. As medical droids finally entered to properly treat the Emperor, Nara realized that everything had changed. A human who had been a caged specimen was now standing as an equal in the Imperial Palace. And somehow, against all odds, she knew this was just the beginning. 3 days passed. Emperor June grew stronger as the poison left his system. Proper medical care and rest were helping him recover, but the Empire was in chaos. Prince Doran's supporters still controlled the military fleet. When news of his arrest spread, several ship commanders declared loyalty to Doran. They threatened to attack the palace unless Doran was released and named emperor. In the Imperial War Room, Nara stood before a large holographic map showing enemy ships surrounding the planet. Military advisors argued loudly around her. We must surrender, said one. Their ships outnumber ours 3-1. Never, shouted another. We fight to the last Viscai. Emperor June sat in a hover chair, still weak but determined to lead. There must be another way, he said. This civil war will destroy everything. Tahoe stood quietly in the corner, watching. He no longer wore a prisoner's gray clothes or a stolen guard uniform. The Emperor had given him proper attire, simple but elegant Viscai clothing altered to fit his human form. Tahoe, the Emperor said suddenly. You were a military strategist on Earth. What would humans do in this situation? The room went silent. The military advisors looked shocked. Ask a human for military advice. It was unheard of. Tahoe stepped forward, studying the holographic map. On Earth, we learned something important about warfare, he said. The side with the most weapons doesn't always win. What nonsense, muttered one advisor. Numbers and firepower decide victory. Tahoe smiled slightly. May I? He asked, gesturing to the controls. Nara nodded. Tahoe adjusted the map, zooming in on different areas. You're fighting the wrong battle, he said. Doran's supporters control ships, yes, but ships need crews. Crews need food, water, air, and motivation. He pointed to supply lines, communication relays, and key personnel on various ships. Instead of attacking their strength, their ships and weapons, attack their weaknesses, supplies, information, and loyalty. For the next hour, Tahoe outlined a strategy unlike anything the Viscai had considered. He called it asymmetric warfare, fighting differently than the enemy expects. His plan didn't rely on direct confrontation, but on smaller, precise actions that would create bigger effects. Send messages to the crews, he suggested. Tell them the truth about Doran's betrayal. Offer pardons to those who surrender. Then disrupt their supply chains here, and here. He pointed to key locations. Their ships are in standard Viscai formation, designed to fight other ships head-on. But what if we don't fight that way? What if we use small, fast ships to hit and run? What if we make them fight shadows while we attack their support systems? The room was silent again, but with a different feeling now. The advisors looked at each other, then at the Emperor. This is not how Viscai wage war, one advisor said slowly. Exactly, Tahoe replied. That's why it will work. Emperor June studied the human carefully, then nodded. We will try Tahoe's strategy. Prepare the fast attack ships. Begin the information campaign immediately. As the advisors rushed to carry out orders, Nara approached Tahoe. Will this really work? She asked quietly. Maybe, Tahoe said honestly, but it gives us a chance without massive bloodshed on both sides. Over the next 2 days, the human strategy unfolded. Small Viscay ships darted between the rebel fleet, causing confusion. Supply ships mysteriously changed course or reported engine failures. Communication channels filled with evidence of Doran's crimes. Most importantly, offers of pardon spread through the rebel fleet. Crews began to question their commanders. Some ships simply turned around and returned to their bases. On the 3rd day, the largest rebel ship, Doran's flagship commanded by his most loyal general, moved toward the palace, weapons ready. It ignored all messages and warnings. They're going to attack, an advisor reported. All our ships are too far away to intercept. The Emperor looked at Tahoe. What now, human strategist? Tahoe's eyes gleamed. Now we play our final card. Every revolution has a center. Remove it, and the structure falls. He turned to Nara. Princess, I think it's time for that special mission we discussed. Nara nodded, her expression determined. I'm ready. The Emperor looked between them. What special mission? The one where your daughter and I board that ship, Tahoe said, and end this war from the inside. The small stealth ship approached the massive rebel flagship silently. Its special coating absorbed sensor scans, making it nearly invisible. Inside, Tahoe and Nara prepared for their mission. Remember the plan, Tahoe said as he checked the stun weapon Nara had given him. We get to the bridge, capture General Kiro, and use the ship's communication system to show everyone the truth. Nara nodded, adjusting her royal armor. As princess, she had trained in basic combat, but never expected to use those skills in real battle. What if they don't listen? She asked. Tahoe looked at her steadily. They will listen to their princess, and if not, he smiled slightly. They'll certainly notice a human on their bridge. Their ship docked with the flagship through a maintenance airlock. The alarms didn't sound. Tahoe had studied Viscay ship designs and found this weakness. Regular security checks didn't cover maintenance systems. They moved through narrow service corridors, avoiding patrols. Twice they had to hide as crew members passed. The flagship was huge, with over 2,000 Viscay on board. The bridge is 2 levels up, Nara whispered, checking a small map on her device. As they reached the main corridor leading to the bridge, their luck ran out. A group of 6 guards spotted them. Intruders, one shouted, raising his weapon. What followed was a display of human combat skill that the Viscay had never seen before. Tahoe moved with incredible speed, disarming the first guard before he could fire. He used the guard's own weapon to stun 2 more. The remaining guards rushed him together. Nara joined the fight, using her royal training to take down 1 guard. But the last 2 managed to sound an alarm before Tahoe could stop them. We need to hurry, he said as alarms blared throughout the ship. They know we're here now. They ran to the bridge doors, which were already locking down. Tahoe wedged a stunned guard's weapon in the door, preventing it from closing completely. With a tremendous effort, he forced the door open enough for them to slip through. On the bridge, General Kiro turned in surprise. He was tall even for a Viscay, with battle scars across his face. Princess Nara, he said, his voice cold, and the human pet I've heard so much about. Bridge officers drew weapons, surrounding them. This doesn't have to end in violence, Nara said. Surrender now, and my father will show mercy. Kiro laughed. Your father is weak. The Empire needs strength to survive. Like poisoning the Emperor? Tahoe asked. Like betraying your own people? That's not strength. That's cowardice. Kiro's face darkened with anger. Kill them both, he ordered. The officers hesitated. Attacking their princess, even on orders, was difficult for loyal Viscay. Tahoe used that moment of hesitation. He lunged forward, not toward Kiro, but toward the communication console. Before anyone could stop him, he slammed his hand down on the broadcast button. Nera stepped forward, her voice ringing clear through the ship-wide system. People of the Viscai Empire, this is Princess Nera. You have been deceived. Prince Doran poisoned my father and tried to take the throne. The proof has been sent to your personal devices. Look for yourselves. This rebellion serves not the Empire, but one man's greed. Throughout the ship, crew members checked their devices. The evidence was clear. Doran's own words, security footage of the poisoning, medical reports. General Kiro roared in fury and raised his weapon at Nera. But before he could fire, something remarkable happened. His own officers moved between him and the princess. "Stand down, General," said his second-in-command. "We serve the Empire, not traitors." Faced with his own crew's rebellion, Kiro had no choice but to surrender. As royal forces secured the flagship, Taiho and Nera stood together on the bridge. Through the viewports, they could see other rebel ships powering down weapons, responding to the truth. "What happens now?" Tahoe asked. Nera looked at the human who had changed everything. A being her people had caged as a specimen, who had fought for her when no one else would. "Now we build something new," she said. "My father has named you the first human ambassador to the Viscai Empire. Together, we'll create peace between our worlds." Tahoe smiled. From caged human to ambassador. Quite a change. "You fought for me," Nera said simply. "Now we fight together for something greater." As the flagship turned back toward the palace, a new era began. The human who had been captured as a curiosity now stood as a bridge between worlds, proving that understanding could grow even in the most unlikely places, between a princess and the caged human who fought for her.